What wonderful. Welcome aboard. Thanks for being here. You know, Rowan County normally fills a breakfast room, our office, with 100 or so folks for things like this. I'm sorry you can't be with us in person to enjoy that enthusiasm, but here you are. And as judges, you are the front line for protecting us. We know that. We support you. You know, everybody's going to remember your names and pass the word on to check it off so we don't forget judges, even though you may be at the bottom or the back or on the back side of the ballot. You are so important. Keep in mind what that fellow who's in the White House has just done to subvert, you know, good legal procedure. So apparently Bill Barr doesn't even like what he done, which is kind of amazing. Anyhow, with that in mind, Judge Lora Cubbage is our speaker today. And you know, to take it away, Laura, we're all behind you. Tell us how important the appellate judge role is and what we can do to help you. Thank you.
Your Honor,
Good morning.
you are on.
Kenneth, you told me to wait for somebody to tell me to speak, and I am the one that didn't. Good morning, Rowan County Democrats. Good morning, good morning. I am so happy to share my breakfast with you, and I am thankful and grateful that you gave me the opportunity to be here today. As before I get started in what I'm going to say, I do want to again acknowledge one of my running mates, which is Tricia Shields. She is on the panel. You all can find her in your panel. I don't see her on my first screen, but I know that she's here. And I want to say, Kenneth, I can't see because I'm switched to the gallery view, but do we have the slate up?
1 second, Your Honor.
Okay. As Kenneth is doing that, wherever I go, wherever I talk, it's never just about me. We have an excellent statewide judicial slate, not just for Court of Appeals, but also for the Supreme Court. But our slate card is a front and back. And so my priority always is to promote the Court of Appeals candidates. And so I always ask whoever, please put this slate card up so that everyone can see the card. And if you can, I think you can see it now. You will see the 5 candidates that's running on the Democratic ticket for the Court of Appeals, and you will see which seat we're running for, as well as our websites. Please, please, please don't forget the judges and go to the website so that you will know the platform and the core values of each one of us. Hands down, I will say, and I will say it to anyone, that we've got the most diverse judicial statewide slate that has probably ever been ran in North Carolina. We have on the Supreme Court, of course, Chief Justice Sherry Beasley, who is our first African-American Chief Justice of the Supreme Court in the 200 years that it has been in existence. We have Lucy Inman running for Supreme Court. We have our first Jewish justice, which is Mark Davis, in the 200 years that the Supreme Court is in existence, serving on the Supreme Court and running to keep his seat. And as you see on the slate, we have Tricia Shields that's running for seat 4 for Court of Appeals. Myself, I'm running for seat 5. Grace Stiers running for seat 6. Judge Reuben Young running for seat 7, and Judge Chris Brook running for seat 13. And both Judge Young and Judge Brook are now serving on the Court of Appeals. So please keep us in mind and when you're spreading our message across the state. So what does the Court of Appeals do? What exactly is the role that they play in the judicial system? Okay, well, when matters are appealed from the lower courts, which is the district court and the superior court, most matters, especially criminal matters, from the district court, when they are appealed, they go to the superior court, which is where I serve currently. If it's a matter of family law, like divorce, equitable distribution, they will skip the superior court and move on to the Court of Appeals. From the superior court, the criminal matters, once they come up to the superior court, these folks are basically asking for a trial. They're appealing probably their conviction, or the state is appealing their case that they lost in the trial in the district court, comes to the superior court, and there is a trial. What a superior court judge does is plays referee over the trial, make sure balls and strikes are called, and then drafts jury instructions to inform the jury of the law that it needs to go by when it gets into the deliberation room. So once your case is appealed from the Superior Court, or either for family law, those things that are appealed to the Court of Appeals, the Court of Appeals does not hear cases based on the facts of the case. They strictly look at cases based on errors of law or errors of procedure. What did the judge do wrong, if anything? And if the judge did something wrong, what is the remedy for that? Sometimes the remedy is just send it back down to the trial court to make findings that support why they ruled the way they did. Sometimes it's send it back down to the trial courts for resentencing because maybe the sentencing wasn't correct. Sometimes it's the judge didn't allow evidence to come in that should have come in, and you send it back down for possibly a whole trial. Sometimes the jury instructions, there were some that were given to the jury that the Court of Appeals feels like wasn't correct, or either there was some jury instruction that was left out that the Court of Appeals feels like should have been put in there. And so those are things that the Court of Appeals is looking at. Court of Appeals is called the working court. Why? Because they run 2 long sessions every year, and they sit in panels of 3. And when the judges sit in panels of 3, they have a session every 2 weeks, and they hear from about 9 to 12 cases. 1 to 3 of those cases are heard for oral arguments, and they're randomly picked. The 3-judge panel is randomly picked, and then even the judge that is going to be responsible for writing the opinion is randomly picked. And on average, a judge on the Court of Appeals will write between 75 and 80 opinions per year. And the most important thing is that 80% of the cases that are at the Court of Appeals stops at the Court of Appeals. So when there is case law that you hear attorneys referencing, 9 times out of 10, that's going to be case law that's coming from the North Carolina Court of Appeals, if you're in North Carolina, because the Supreme Court basically picks the cases that they want to hear. And when these cases are in the North Carolina Court of Appeals, on the 3-judge panel, a lot of times there's a 3-judge consensus, and that means that's where it stops. If there's one judge that dissents, that gives the case an automatic right of appeal to the Supreme Court. But again, a lot of times the Supreme Court will, confirm what the appellate court has done, and that means that it stops there. One of the most notable cases that you all have probably we were all read about and probably cheering was the voter ID law. That was probably that was in some people's mind one of the most significant cases of 2020. And why do I say that? Is because it's probably in the minds of the people that thought they were not going to be allowed to vote, but now they are allowed to vote. And I won't get into the real deep gist of the case, but I'll just give you a quick overview. So there was a question on the ballot, just a generic question. Do you think that people should have to have a ID in order to vote? The majority of the public voted yes. What wasn't on the ballot was the requirements and restrictions that were going to go into that ID. So it was, do you think people should have an ID to vote? The popular vote said yes. And then it came back and then the result of that was, oh yeah, and by the way, Congress gets to set the requirements around what IDs are approved and what IDs are restricted. So our Congress, and all of their, great intelligence, decided that we're going to allow certain IDs and we're not going to allow certain IDs. For instance, there was IDs from 4-year colleges that were okay, but community college IDs were not okay. If you're on public assistance, that ID, excuse me, to get that public assistance was not okay. Well, in a logical mind, you might think, well, if someone can use the public assistance ID to get federal funds or federal assistance, why come they can't vote with it? Well, this case was challenged by several organizations. It went to the Court of Appeals, and the Court of Appeals judges, the 3-judge panel, in a consensus decided what the legislative branch did was went in, and they, with precision, decided that the IDs that was not going to be approved were those IDs that were mainly carried by African Americans or used by African Americans. And so they call it discriminatory. They struck it down, and the result of that was over 300,000 people will be allowed to vote in the 2020 elections. All right. That's one of the reasons why we have got to make sure that we know who the judges are on the Court of Appeals, not just who they are, not just what they look like, but that's why on our slate cards, we put our websites up. And you're going to get all kinds of information in our websites. We are allowed to give 2 to 3 minute stump speeches everywhere we go. And trust me, you all know this. We tailor them and we make them perfect for that 2 or 3 minutes. But that does not give you a complete overview of what our core values or what our core ideologies are. And so you need to really research us and read more about us, and even read about the opponents to see the difference and why we are going to be more qualified. And again, I will say hands down that this Democratic slate, all 8 of us for the Court of Appeals and the Supreme Court, is by far, hands down, the most qualified slate that I have seen in a very, very long time. Another thing that you want to know about the Court of Appeals is 80% of the cases that the Court of Appeals hears is going to be criminal cases. And those criminal cases are going to come from the Superior Court. And so you want trial court judges on your Court of Appeals because we come from the perspective where we've drafted these jury instructions. We've heard these motions to suppress. We've objected to evidence coming in, or we've allowed evidence to come in. And so we kind of give a different perspective on that. The other 20% of the criminal case of the cases that the Court of Appeals here will be civil, and they will come from all kinds of ranges, which again is why we need people on the Court of Appeals that has not just diversity of race, but diversity of experience and diversity of perspective. My running mate, Tricia Shields, she does some criminal, but mostly civil. Grace Stiers is in energy law. So when these types of cases come in, you want folks that have experience in those areas to be able to collaborate with the other 2 judges that are on the panel and kind of give them some insight on an area of law that they may not have practiced in their former life before coming a Court of Appeals judge. One thing you must remember about the Court of Appeals judges, we are not legislators. We don't make the law, we follow the law. So we need judges on the court and justices on the Supreme Court that are committed to the rule of law. Here's where the sticky part comes in. And Jeffrey mentioned some things about our president. So we just saw just yesterday at the 11th hour that our president commuted the sentence of Roger Stone. All right. When we look at these protests that has been going on around the country, this is exactly the message. When you take out the riffraff and you take out the few folks that wanted to loot and riot, this is the message and the cries that people are saying to us. There is 2 justice systems out there. That's what they're saying. And we see it. We have seen it play out right yesterday evening. No matter which station news you was looking at, your headlines read, the president has commuted the sentence of Roger Stone. Is that the president's right? It absolutely is. It is within his purview to commute the sentence of anybody he sees fit. But here's what you saw play out. Roger Stone is a longtime friend, associate, and supporter of the president. Roger Stone was convicted by a jury unanimously. So he had his opportunity. The jury unanimously said, you are guilty, not of 1 count, but of 7 counts of what he was tried for. He got convicted. And because of who he knows, because of his economic position, and possibly because of the color of his skin, his sentence gets commuted. So all the protesters that you see out in the street that's crying and trying to send a message is simply saying, we need one justice system that works for everybody, that's equal to everybody. And that is the constitutional right, equal protection of the law for everyone. And so that's what we need to be mindful of. Politics, listen, I will tell you, without a shadow of a doubt, I am super, super proud to be running as a Democratic nominee for seat number 5. Would not change it for anything in this world. However, one of the worst things, in my opinion, that happened in 2016 was when judges were made to run in partisan races. And North Carolina has flipped back and forth on that over the years. Yes, partisan, no partisan. Politics should play no role in the judiciary. It should not be who you know. It should not be who you're contacted to. It should not be what registered party you are in when people are going to vote. One of these things that happens when that happens is you have Democrats that think that a Democratic judge is always going to rule in their favor, and that's just not the case. You have Republicans that might think that a Democratic judge is always going to rule against them, and that is not the case. Cases that are heard or reviewed should be heard or reviewed based on justice and based on the rule of law, not predicated on anything else. And so that's why I strongly, I'm against judges running in partisan races, because it just brings politics into a place where politics should not be. We have a system in place, and that system should work for everyone. And those are some of the reasons why I am running for the Court of Appeals. When we talk about diversity, I'm a strong advocate for diversity. Our makeup of our branches of government should reflect the demographics of our state. And simply put, they do not. On the Court of Appeals, we have 15 judges. Right now, currently sitting, we have 2 African Americans out of those 15. We have 1 woman whose seat I am running for, which is my mentor, Judge Rhonda Bryant. And we have Judge Reuben Young, who got appointed last year and is running to keep his seat. Best case scenario, guys, we still will have 2 African Americans. 1 woman, myself, and Judge Reuben Young will keep his seat. Worst case scenario, we will have 1 African American, and that is my opponent, who was the Republican nominee. That cannot continue to be. It just simply cannot. And especially, I will go back to when you think about the criminal cases that are going to come into the Court of Appeal, and those cases are 80% criminal. We all know that out of those 80% of the criminal cases that the Court of Appeals will hear, 80% of those defendants in those cases are African American. If there is not different perspective and different backgrounds, and even diversity in race, many people feel like they don't get a shot, and they don't get a fair shot, and people don't necessarily understand. And even though we're making decisions based on the rule of law, each judge may read one law and may interpret it 15 different ways. And if you don't have some judges that can kind of understand the background of the cases that's coming before them, then that viewpoint or that perspective just simply does not come into play when you're analyzing whether there was an error of procedure or an error of law. So I am a strong, strong advocate for diversity and inclusion, and I say we need it. So guys, what we need on the Court of Appeals, number 1, is please, 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 please don't forget the judges. And when you are spreading our message, please let everyone know we are considered down the ballot candidates. They will have to turn that ballot over, and they will have to look for us, and they will have to vote for us. We've got about 10 million people in North Carolina, and if we're lucky, 3 million, maybe to 5 million will come out to vote. So we've got to, 1, try to get as many of these 10 million out to vote as we can, and we've got to get the message across the state. Even now, I would have loved to have been in person with you all, because I'm a people person. I like people contact. But we have to do things on Zoom and virtually. But nevertheless, even though I'm sitting in Greensboro, my message has got to get across all the counties in North Carolina. And that's hard to do except by word of mouth, except by spreading the message. So we need your support in helping us to get the message across. Jeffrey cannot stress enough. And I wanted to say this because I've seen in the chat where folks were asking about when can they request their absentee ballot. You can request your absentee ballot now. And I would encourage everyone to go ahead and request an absentee ballot, even if you decide when voting time comes that you want to actually physically go to the polls. You still have that option. But if you decide that you don't want to go to the polls, then you have that absentee ballot in your hand, and you can go ahead and vote and make sure that your voice is heard. And someone did mention the absentee ballot is not the request, is not the ballot. It's just you asking for the ballot. We were told on a call on Thursday that the ballot will be set in stone on August the 1st, and it will go to print on August the 1st. So if you feel like if you have already sent that request in and you're waiting, then that's what you're waiting on, is for the ballot to be printed. And someone asked in the chat, isn't the ballot already set? Well, here's the deal. It very rarely happens, but the deal is that if someone wants to withdraw their name as a candidate, even now, the elections law gives them the right to do that, but they can only do that before the ballot is printed. And so that's why you will not get a ballot until after it's printed, because everyone still has the legal ability to ask for permission to withdraw before that ballot is printed. So please, please, please go ahead and request those ballots. Make sure you check your registration. We've seen this far too often in years past, and especially in 2016, folks were out there, really thought that their names was on the register because they actually voted in the last election. Even in the last midterm election, they get to up to the I guess the poll worker, and they say, or the precinct worker, and they say, your names has been purged or your registration's not valid. You know, then we're in a quandary. And as Jeffrey mentioned, or Kenneth mentioned, then we're holding up the lines that stand, you know, around the corner to vote to try to get it straight. And I seen that in 2018 when I ran to keep my Superior Court seat. I seen several people. Not only did I see several people that got turned away as they came out of the building from voting, you know, they were feeling anxious and angry. I also saw and had to actually go inside of a precinct here in Guilford County where they tried to tell people, oh no, you can't vote. And this was during early voting. You can't vote here. You have to go somewhere else. I have no idea why folks were told that. Even at the 7 o'clock hour, folks were told we close at 7 o'clock. And average voters do not understand. If you're in that line, they have to let you vote. If you were in that line before the time shut down, they have to allow you to vote. They also don't understand that you can basically go to any site during early voting and vote. They don't normally get that. And so when they're told, oh no, you have to go across town, you know, they're looking at their clock and going, I don't have time to get across town. And a lot of times we know that they may leave with the intention of going back on the next early voting day, but then something comes up and they never get back to vote. So we have to make sure that that doesn't happen as well. So that's really all I came to share with you all. And I want you again to please, please, please don't forget the judges, support us. Guys, personally, I will tell you, for me, I need your support by considering to donate to my campaign. And from March through June 1st, I suspended my fundraising efforts because I just could not ask folks for money that were trying to figure out how they were going to make ends meet in this COVID-19 pandemic. Many, many, many of the folks that are my constituents, you know, live paycheck to paycheck. They have children, they have bills, and they even got downsized or laid off and had lots and lots of trouble trying to get through this unemployment issue. And even the small businesses had lots and lots of trouble trying to get through the payment program that were supposed to be for small businesses. So I suspended my campaign, got back on the fundraising efforts, got back on the fundraising efforts on June the 1st. So I am a little bit behind, but I'm not completely out. So whatever you feel like you can contribute, I would love for you to go to my website. It's cubbageforjudge.com, and give whatever you feel like you can, and even ask some of your friends to donate to the campaign. Because again, regardless of whether I'm sitting in Greensboro or not, I have got to get my message across the state. And I need your help to do that. So thank you again for having me for breakfast. And again, please, please, please don't forget the judges. And let me just add this, and I think Jeffrey said it in his commentation. We are your front line of defense. As you see from even the Supreme Court over the last couple of weeks, when things are challenged in the legislative branch and the executive branch, the courts are the checks and balances on that. we are going to handle these and make these decisions. And these decisions are what's going to govern your life. And if you never step foot in a courtroom for anything civil or criminal, the decisions that we make still will affect your life and the life of your family and the life of those that you know and love. And so you have to make sure that you know who the judges are. But on top of that, we have got to change leadership from the courthouse to the White House. And if 2020, as of July the 11th, has not shown you that we need some stiff changes in leadership, I'm not sure what we're waiting to see. So that is my spill. Thank you so much for allowing me to have my breakfast, which is my coffee with you. And again, please, please, please don't forget the judges.